I'm Shahar Azani, and in the news, Israel at war. Following Hamas's slaughter of innocent Jewish women, men, children, and the elderly, a number which has risen now to around 1,400 people, Israel is attacking the Nazi Hamas in Gaza. While it does so, Israel's north is on high alert, with Iran's proxy Hezbollah continuing to attack Israel from that front. What's going to happen with Iran? Where is Syria in all of this? Where is Russia? Joining us all the way from Israel is Professor Efraim Inbar. Professor Inbar is president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He was a professor of political studies at Bar Ilan University and the founding director of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Inbar's area of specialization is Middle Eastern strategic issues, with a special interest in the politics and strategy of Israeli national security. He has written 5 books and over 100 scholarly articles, and he is exactly the person we would like to hear from today. Professor Inbar, thank you so much for joining us on JBS today.
Shalom to everybody from Jerusalem.
From Jerusalem. Let me first ask you the obvious question, yet not so obvious these days. How are you?
I'm fine personally, and my family, of course, we are worried. I have a son in the reserve unit, in a paratrooper unit, so I worry about him, but otherwise we hope that despite the bad beginning, we'll vanquish Hamas.
Will vanquish Hamas. So let's dive into the strategic outlook at the moment. First of all, as far as the goal of the operation, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the goal is to vanquish, eradicate, destroy Hamas. Do you see it the same way, and do you see this as a viable goal of the fighting in Gaza?
I think this is an existential war in the Middle East. We cannot survive without being strong and seen by everybody as a very strong country. What happened 10 days ago, our deterrence has been greatly eroded. The pictures coming out from the settlements along the Gaza border, the pictures of Israeli soldiers being kidnapped are terrible pictures that whet the appetite of our enemies. If you are not strong, if you have no deterrence, you invite aggression. Therefore, this war has to end with a big, unequivocal Israeli victory.
So let's start with that arena first in Gaza. In your view, what does an Israeli victory in Gaza look like?
It looks very simple. We go in, capture the Hamas leadership. We kill many Hamas terrorists, clean the area of missiles, clean the area of any material that can help the military effort, the terrorist effort of Hamas, and make it quite clear that Hamas has suffered an unbelievable debacle.
Do you think that Israel, once entering Gaza, should retain control of the Gaza Strip, or should we go in and out?
I think that we should go in. It will take a few weeks, probably, this operation. A few months more will take to clean the area of Hamas. And I don't think Israelis have an appetite of ruling over Gazans, particularly the Gazans. Many of them are Hamas sympathizers. We should not forget that Hamas won a democratic election among the Palestinians. And the appeal Hamas has, unfortunately, among the Palestinians is very large.
Right, that's a very important point you're making, Professor Inbar, because people tend to to discuss only Hamas itself without any reference to the support it has within the civilian population. But the images were very clear, Professor. We have seen the kidnapped Israeli innocent civilians marched through the streets of Gaza, humiliated to the chants of the masses, almost a barbaric image of thousands of years ago.
We've seen children in cages. This is terrible. I think that it's quite clear now to much of the civilized world that Hamas can be compared to Daesh, to ISIS. They are barbarians, and we have every moral right to pursue them and kill them. Such people do not deserve to live.
How do you view the issue of humanitarian assistance? We keep on hearing, of course, as is natural now, since we're talking about the progression of the war and the Israeli attacks on Hamas's headquarters in Gaza, that Israel is demanded to supply water, to supply fuel, solar, energy, medicine to Gaza. How do you see those demands of Israel, and do you think Israel should comply?
I think those demands are totally not reasonable. We have no moral duty whatsoever to supply the children of our enemies with any means, such water or electricity. I don't remember the Americans during World War II taking care of the Nazi children. I think this is totally immoral to demand of Israel to supply any means to the Gazans. Therefore, our policy is correct. I think for too long, we supplied water and electricity to Gaza. Furthermore, I think that Israel is in favor of a humanitarian corridor which will allow civilians in Gaza to move away from the war zone and go elsewhere. This is in great contrast to what Hamas is doing. They are shooting at our civilians. We allow them to vacate their houses and find a refugee elsewhere.
You know, Professor, I was just making that exact point, that people complain about the IDF allowing Gazan residents to leave their homes in order to live, which is a far more than our civilians were able to receive, but being tortured and slaughtered in their homes and in their beds, which is, I think, a point that doesn't come across enough, the way this situation is explained on the international battlefield of public opinion.
I think we should demand of Hamas to behave in a humanitarian way. We should also stress that actually Hamas is stopping and right. is trying to prevent a humanitarian corridor. They want the civilians to be used as human shields, which is in clear violation of every international law. Their
very existence is in clear violation.
Yeah, it is in clear violation, of course. And they are using their own civilians as a human shield, endangering Gazan civilians.
We also hear reports that Hamas terrorists are also stealing supplies from UNRWA headquarters, gas, fuel, solar, and other elements necessary for the civilian population. So it's quite clear that they have no compassion, neither for Israeli babies, women, and children, nor for their own people.
I think, by the way, it's quite clear, not only in Gaza, but in every effort to supply, in cases of humanitarian crisis, the people with the guns are eating well, the people with the guns are drinking well, and the rest of the population is suffering.
And we also see the political leadership of Hamas, which is now, traveling the world, staying at lavish 4 or 5-star hotels. That should also be said.
I think in this respect, we should point out at the role of Qatar. Qatar is a state that is supposed to be friendly to the United States, but it harbors Hamas leadership. And actually, American soldiers are maybe 1 hour or 2 hours away from Hamas headquarters in Qatar. And the Americans, unfortunately, are not demanding of Qatar to hand over those war criminals.
So what you're saying is there have to be regional and long-term ramifications to what's happening now between Israel and the Nazi Hamas terrorists in Gaza, which can reach all the way up to Qatar and other countries in the region. Let's talk about the regional map for a moment now. How do you view this fight between Israel and Hamas to be relevant also to Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Iran? Describe to us the regional geopolitical status at the moment.
It is basically a war between Israel and Iran. Iran is the octopus, and its branches are in Lebanon, Hezbollah. Its branches are in Gaza, Hamas. Its branches are in Iraq. Its branches are in Yemen, the Houthis. Its branches are in Syria, the Shiite militias. And this war was largely orchestrated by Iran. This is Iranian strategic thinking. And unfortunately, I don't see the American government that is declaring its great support for Israel saying anything about Iran. There is more and more evidence that the Iranians were behind this murderous attack against Israeli civilians. However, the State Department, Secretary of State Blinken, refused to acknowledge an Iranian role. This is very bad. I think the Americans should wake up to the Iranian role. I'm afraid that the American unwillingness, reluctance to point out to Iran is an attempt to save the Iranian-American nuclear deal. This is what they are after. They don't want to associate Iran with Hamas because they want to keep Iran as a respectable partner for a deal. It's not clear to me why they denounce Hamas as the enemy of humanity, but not its sponsor. Iran is the country that supplied weapons, supplied funds, trained Hamas. It was behind planning this attack. And the Americans are quiet about it. I think America should wake up.
Professor Inbar, I have to admit it's difficult for me to hear the word respectable and Iran in the same sentence, but it takes us back to the moral position of the world, because you mentioned the nuclear deal between the US and the West and the Islamic Republic. But the truth is that that deal had no relevance to its act of continuous terror in Israel and throughout the region. That is to say, there were two different tracks. One is this supposed deal, and then the other one was Iran was allowed to continue with its sabotaging and undermining the people of the region, continuing to export misery out of Tehran, out of the East, into the lives of so many millions. And there was no reference to it whatsoever in the nuclear deal, was there?
I would even expand and remind your audience that Iranians are attacking American vessels in the Indian Ocean. I think America, to some extent, is behaving nowadays on the issue of Iran like an ostrich. It refuses to face reality.
Yeah, how can we ignore the role of Iran when we are hearing that these very days after the atrocious attack, the Iranian foreign minister is meeting with terror leaders, in Lebanon and elsewhere, and threatening Israel directly in with regards to what Israel is doing now in Gaza? Is it even possible to disregard Iran's role, Professor?
The fact is that the leader of the free world is ignoring it, and actually tacitly allowing Iran to continue its mischief in the Middle East. And Iran is probably planning a multi-front war against Israel. And we may see soon an escalation on the northern border. We may see Hezbollah that is fully subservient to Tehran increase the intensity and the number of attacks on Israel's northern border.
Professor, there are those in Israel who believe that even before a ground incursion into Gaza, that Israel should preemptively attack Hezbollah in Lebanon to be done with that threat and then move into Gaza. How do you feel about the order of fronts, if need be, in this regard? Do you support the Israeli attempt to separate the two fronts, or how do you feel about this?
I've been on record for some time advocating a preemptive attack on Hezbollah. So I definitely agree with this rationale, but I don't agree with its timing. Now we are busy with Hamas in Gaza, and we have to concentrate on Gaza in order to achieve a clear victory in order to restore deterrence. Unfortunately, Israel is a small country. Our army is not large enough to achieve victory simultaneously on both borders. Therefore, we have to concentrate on Gaza, defend the northern border, and if needed, to go to Lebanon afterwards.
Do you think that Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who prides himself at supposedly knowing Israeli society intimately, has the wrong assumption when it comes to Israeli response, should he choose to launch an overall attack?
I think that the main thinking of Iran and its proxies in the Middle East is that the weakest point of Israel is its society. And therefore, their strategy is population center. This is why they attack the population, hoping that the Israeli population will get tired and will leave the country. This is their dream. I think they are wrong. We've seen the response of the Israeli people to the recent attack. It is, of course, a gloomy mood, but at the same time, great determination to go to war and win. We should see the pictures of the Israelis lining up for airplanes.
Right, we see them right here in the U.S. We see them in the terminals. We see they're actually flocking to the airport to join the Israeli Defense Forces in this most justifiable of battles for Israel's existence.
Yeah, and actually they are willing to wait days in order to get a ticket because most airlines do not fly any longer to Israel. So the spirit of the people is great. The only light in the situation that we are in is the spirit of the people. We see courageous behavior. We see people that help each other despite the tragedies. And this is what brings me to believe that eventually we'll win. It may be a heavy price, and Israelis understand that it's a heavy price. Most Israelis have served in the military. They know the price of a military operation in Gaza. And nevertheless, people of Israel are fully mobilized to go to war and win.
Professor, haven't we already paid the heaviest of prices?
No, unfortunately, no. An invasion of Gaza will be costly and lengthy. We have to realize that, and I think Israelis understand that.
How do you see
they are ready to pay?
Right. How do you see the aerial attacks on Gaza as being different from what we've seen in past rounds between Israel and Nazi Hamas in the past, from 2014 and other operations?
The reports are that it's a more intensive bombarding from air, but we should realize that not everything can be done from air. We have to go in, It needs infantry operation. It needs large ground forces, which unfortunately we have neglected for the past few years. But this is what is needed. And Israelis understand that a ground operation is a necessity in order to clean the area of Hamas.
Professor, I want to ask you, it's reported that Russia's President Vladimir Putin is supposed to be speaking with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Where is Russia in all of this, and how do you see it aligns itself geopolitically in the region at the moment?
Russia today has accepted fully the Hamas narrative. Russia sides with Hamas by demanding an immediate ceasefire, which basically is preventing Israel from punishing Hamas. Russia is in alliance with Iran. It needs Iran for certain weapon supply. It is also aligned with China, which is also not friendly to Israel. China is pro-Palestinian, and I am disappointed from the Russian position, particularly since Israel has taken a neutral position on the question of Ukraine. And we actually were not fully part of the Western alliance because the Russians are our neighbors in Syria. I don't think they appreciate enough our position.
Should that change now?
I think that we should definitely reassess our policy vis-à-vis Russia, but we should always be rational and see what can be done. We should not forget that, after all, Israel is a small country, and Russia can do some harm to Israel.
Especially in our, volatile state at the moment. Professor, since we're almost out of time, I want to ask you, speaking to us from Jerusalem, is there anything, any message you want to conclude with for our viewers, Jews and non-Jews alike, who are watching us at the moment and are anxious to see Israel winning this? What do you want to tell them?
I want to tell everybody that Israel is strong. Israel eventually will be victorious. And of course, if anybody wants to help the war effort, and afterwards, will be very thankful.
Professor Inbar, what can I say? I want to thank you for joining us. I want to wish all the best to you and your family, and of course, your son on the front lines. Thank you for your insights in this complex situation in a very complex region. Like you say, I'm in total agreement. We will win this because we simply have no other choice. I just wish the best of health and the best of support for the people of Israel at this time. Please stay safe and let's win this.
Thank you. Shalom from Jerusalem.
And to all of you, our viewers, we will continue to keep you updated about all that's unfolding in the Middle East, which, as you just heard, isn't just about Israel and Hamas. There are great regional consequences and global consequences to the battle that's being waged at the moment. But at the same time, there are great moral, not just strategic meanings for Israel and the free world in fighting such Nazi evil. May we see better days. I'm Shahar Azani. Thank you all for watching. And Am Israel Chai.
Amen.